I'm David Toman, author of nootropicsexpert.com, and in this video I'm going to share with you what we found to be the best nootropics to treat post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. We'll look at some of the symptoms of PTSD and how to recognize it, then we'll investigate what PTSD does to your brain, and we conclude this video with the best nootropics proven to help to treat the symptoms of PTSD. If you live in a hurricane-prone or typhoon-prone area, you're familiar with the level of panic and frenzy leading up to the arrival of a major storm. And you may have noticed the residual stress you feel during the recovery and the fatigue after the storm leaves. But the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD from monumental natural disasters like hurricanes, typhoons, fires, earthquakes, tornadoes, they're easy to overlook. And you may not realize that levels of hypersensitivity, feeling on edge, brain fog, depression, and feelings of helplessness can be attributed to the disaster you just survived. A study in 2005 by the CDC revealed that more than 50% of those surveyed after Hurricane Katrina showed signs of possible need for mental health treatment. In New York, a study showed that in areas flooded by Sandy, over 11% of the people surveyed showed symptoms of PTSD. Another comprehensive report revealed that more than 2/3 of us are likely to be exposed to trauma in our lifetime, and up to 1/5 of Americans could experience a traumatic event in any given year. So recent history shows that you can experience the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD from a hurricane and other natural disasters, just like soldiers returning from combat. Unfortunately, the best mainstream medicine can offer hurricane survivors and those who've gone through other natural disasters like floods, fires, earthquakes is psychotherapy or like talk therapy, antidepressants, benzodiazepines, or dopamine-blocking agents. So in this video, we'll investigate how to recognize the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, then into recent research on what PTSD does to your brain. And then we'll dive into some of the proven natural dietary and nootropic supplements that have been shown effective in helping people recover from PTSD. When Hurricane Irma first slammed into Barbuda in the Eastern Caribbean, she was a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 185 miles an hour. After wiping out the islands of Barbuda, St. Martin in the USVI and BVI and the Turks and Caicos, the storm tore up the north coast of Cuba, setting a record for coastal flooding from Bacopa in the east to west of Havana. By the time Irma reached Naples, Florida, the storm weakened to a Category 4 with peak winds of 142 miles an hour. Once the storm petered out somewhere over Alabama, 16 million people were left without power. Now, a month prior to Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey slammed into Texas as a Category 4, dumping an estimated 27 trillion gallons of water over the state. And the death toll continued to rise days and weeks after the storm. But long after the floodwaters recede and the devastation is cleaned up, those who lived through a hurricane or a super typhoon face a different kind of recovery from the storm's assault to their physical and mental health. The stress that can come from not knowing if your home was underwater, not knowing if your roof was going to fall on your head, seeing someone killed or bodies floating by, the incredible sound of a storm that reminded you of the racket created by 3 freight trains going by. In the immediate aftermath of a crisis like Hurricane Irma or Harvey or Florence recently, the priority is survival. But after first responders and volunteers leave and the outpouring of support subsides, survivors are left with haunting memories and the stress that can take a toll on mental health, and for many, the very real symptoms of PTSD. The full syndrome post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, was first defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the third edition of the American Psychiatric Association in 1990. It was defined as a traumatic event as conceptualized as a catastrophic stressor that was outside the range of usual human experience. They had in mind events such as torture, rape, and the Holocaust, atomic bombings, natural and man-made disasters. Now, while most people exposed to traumatic events do not develop PTSD, others go on to develop full-blown syndrome. The stressor criterion specifies that a person has been exposed to a catastrophic event or repeated exposure to the horrific consequences of a traumatic event, especially by people like police officers and body handlers. You can get and experience the symptoms of PTSD for decades or even a lifetime. Symptoms usually begin within 3 months of the traumatic incident, but sometimes can occur much later. For symptoms to be considered PTSD, they must last more than a month and be severe enough to interfere in functioning relationships or work. Now, here's a brief list of the symptoms. Re-experiencing symptoms, which are flashbacks or reliving the event over and over, nightmares and frightening thoughts. There's avoidance symptoms, avoiding places, events, or objects that are reminders of the experience, avoiding thoughts or feelings related to the trauma or event, feeling detached or unable to connect with loved ones. And then there's arousal and reactivity symptoms, hypersensitivity or easily startled, hypervigilant or feeling tense or on edge, difficulty sleeping or insomnia, irritability or angry outbursts. And there's cognition and mood symptoms, brain fog, trouble concentrating, loss of memory, depression, helplessness, trouble remembering key features of the traumatic event, feelings of guilt or blame, loss of interest in enjoyable activities, and headaches. In children with PTSD, wetting the bed after learning how to use the toilet, forgetting how or unable to talk, acting out the scary event during playtime, being unusually clingy with a parent or other adult. But there is increasing evidence that PTSD isn't just psychological. Several researchers have found a strong link between PTSD and inflammation or other immune responses. A study published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research found elevated levels of C-reactive protein in survivors of the World Trade Center attack. The association between this biomarker and PTSD is so strong that some have proposed diagnosing PTSD with a C-reactive protein blood test. PTSD is a stress disorder. Neuroscientists at the University of California, Berkeley, found that chronic stress triggers long-term changes in the brain structure and function. Chronic stress changes neural networks. Cortisol creates a domino effect that hardwires pathways between the hippocampus and amygdala. The amygdala, or lizard brain, is the area responsible for your fight or flight response. This hardwiring caused by stress is not the way your brain was designed, but chronic ongoing stress tricks your brain into rebuilding circuits and hunkering down for the long haul. This rewiring appears to be permanent unless you intervene with something like any one of the nootropic supplements that we'll investigate in a minute. Chronic stress seems to flip a switch in the stem cells in your brain and turns them into a type of cell that prevents connections to the prefrontal cortex, preventing improved learning and memory, and laying down the scaffolding linked to anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Chronic stress coats neurons and myelin. It reduces the number of neurons and gray matter and decreases the brain's, while white matter increases. Under conditions of chronic stress and excess cortisol, your brain's neurons are coated or sheathed in myelin. Under healthy conditions, this sheathing is a protective measure. But this excess of sheathing is likely an evolutionary measure made to reinforce the connection between the hippocampus and amygdala, improving the fight or flight response during extended periods of threat or attack. The chronic stress caused by hurricanes and other natural disasters which result in PTSD hijacks your fight or flight response system. It backfires in daily life after a traumatic event like a hurricane in which you are no longer in physical danger. If you recognize any of the symptoms of the PTSD months after a hurricane or other disaster, there is hope. You can recover from post-traumatic stress disorder. Your doctor will likely prescribe antidepressants, benzodiazepines, or dopamine-blocking agents, and may refer you to a psychiatrist for talk therapy, or worse yet, something like prolonged exposure therapy, where you're told to keep on reliving the event until you're desensitized to it. Now that sounds like cruel and unusual punishment to me. But if you're brave, you might want to try it. Instead, I recommend trying some natural dietary or nootropic supplements. Now, the following nootropics have been found in clinical settings and in real life to help alleviate the symptoms of PTSD. Each nootropic I'm going to talk about in this video has got a live link in the original transcript of this video over on Nootropics Expert. So if you go to the original transcript, each of these links will take you through to the full review for that particular dietary supplement, including recommended dosage and side effects, which I'm not going to talk about here. Ashwagandha. This ancient Ayurvedic herb, ashwagandha, has been used for thousands of years and for its remarkable stress-relieving properties. It helps reduce anxiety and depression because it reduces the stress hormone cortisol. It lowers blood sugar levels and it improves lipid profiles. Ashwagandha helps regenerate axons and dendrites of neurons in your brain. It helps reconstruct synapses, the junctions where neurons communicate with other neurons, boosting memory and restoring neural networks affected by severe stress like PTSD. But ashwagandha does so much more than just relieve stress, anxiety, and depression. So go to the original transcript and click on the link to the full review for this remarkable herb. Just one example is a study done comparing ashwagandha to the popular benzodiazepine lorazepam or Ativan, and the tricyclic antidepressant tofranil. The researchers concluded that as a mood stabilizer, ashwagandha worked on depression and anxiety as well as either of those two antidepressants. Bacopa Monnieri is a perennial aquatic herb originally found in the wetlands of Southeast Asia. Otherwise known as water hyssop, it is often referred to as Brahmi, named after the supreme god Brahma. Bacopa's two active components are bacosides A and B. They improve the signaling of electrical impulses between neurons in your brain. Bacosides also help rebuild damaged neurons, the same neurons damaged by chronic stress caused by PTSD. Bacopa also reduces stress and anxiety. Research at Banara Hindu University in India showed Bacopa as effective for anxiety as the benzodiazepine drug lorazepam. One of the side effects of lorazepam is memory loss. Bacopa, on the other hand, reduces anxiety while boosting cognition and memory. NADH is the active enzyme form of vitamin B3 or niacin that is found in and critical for the healing of every cell in your body and brain. NADH is the primary carrier of electrons from glucose and lactate to ATP for ATP synthesis. ATP is the fuel source for mitochondria, the power supply for each one of your brain cells. So you need NADH to transfer the energy from the food you eat into the type of energy your body can use. Research has shown that supplementing with NADH regenerates stem cells in your brain, decreasing anxiety and reducing the symptoms of chronic fatigue. Some clinics in the USA and other countries are using NADH therapy as a treatment for addiction, anxiety, depression, chronic stress, and PTSD. Lithium orotate. Lithium is a soft, silvery white alkali metal and trace element considered essential for human health. The therapeutic use of lithium goes back to the ancient Greek and Roman times. People enjoyed soaking in alkali springs to help with physical and mental stress. Today, lithium has an undeserved reputation as only a drug used to treat bipolar disorder and mania. But the clinical research on the neuroprotective benefits of lithium are so overwhelming, some scientists are beginning to ask, why isn't everybody using lithium? Here we're talking about microdosing lithium in the form of lithium orotate for treating the symptoms of PTSD. Lithium has been shown to prevent apoptosis, reduce glutamate toxicity mediated by NMDA receptors, promotes BDNF, needed for synaptic plasticity for learning and memory, and it stimulates neural stem cells. Supplementing with lithium orotate has been shown to stabilize mood and even prevent depression and even suicide. Lithium orotate will help put a stop to outbursts of rage and reduce anxiety. For those dealing with PTSD in the aftermath of a hurricane, using lithium orotate could mean feeling excited about life for the first time in a long time. Anxiety and social anxiety are no longer a problem. Life is simply more fun and enjoyable. If you're dealing with insomnia, racing thoughts, or lack of motivation, I highly recommend trying lithium orotate and see how it works for you. Motivation could increase and you'll have more coping ability. L-Theanine is a non-dietary amino acid found in green tea. It is similar to the neurotransmitters L-glutamate and L-glutamine. L-Theanine boosts alpha brain waves promoting alert relaxation and theta brain waves associated with creativity and relief from trauma. L-Theanine increases GABA, serotonin, and dopamine levels in your brain, as well as increasing BDNF and nerve growth factor, producing an energizing and calming effect and improving cognition and memory. And L-Theanine is an antagonist of NMDA receptors, which can inhibit synaptic release of glutamate, protecting your brain from overstimulation caused by glutamate and possible glutamate toxicity. You can get L-Theanine in capsule or tablet form, 200 to 400 milligrams, and use it once or twice a day. My preferred way of getting L-Theanine is drinking 3 or 4 cups of green tea throughout my day. But extracting the optimal amount of L-Theanine from green tea is both an art and a science. Please see the full review for L-Theanine over on Nootropic's Expert for more on this remarkable nootropic, including how to steep the perfect cup of green tea. Phenibut is an analog of the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA. It was developed in St. Petersburg, Russia in 1963 and has since been used as a pharmaceutical used to treat PTSD, anxiety, depression, insomnia, alcoholism, and other neurological disorders. The addition of a phenyl ring allows Phenibut to cross the blood-brain barrier much more readily than supplementing with GABA. This nootropic boosts the calming neurotransmitter GABA and has been shown to decrease beta brain waves and increase alpha brain waves. Some neurohackers say that Phenibut is the best anti-anxiety medication they've ever used, including some of the most well-known pharmaceuticals used to treat anxiety, and with none of the nasty side effects that come from using prescription meds. And I've even seen some reports by combat veterans who say that Phenibut worked far better than any prescription anti-anxiety med. Truly worth considering for treating the symptoms of PTSD once the hurricane is over. The ancient remedy Rhodiola Rosea has remarkable stress-relieving and anti-anxiety properties and stands shoulder to shoulder with some of the most potent drugs used in depression and anxiety. Rhodiola Rosea helps in neurogenesis by repairing and growing new neurons. It also activates the synthesis and resynthesis of ATP, your body and brain cells' main energy source. Rhodiola Rosea helps reduce the inflammatory C-reactive protein, which is some professionals considering using as a diagnostic tool for PTSD. And selidroside, one of the many components of this incredible herb, protects neurons from oxidative stress-induced cell death. Reports from the nootropic community and data from clinical trials show that Rhodiola Rosea encourages a balanced mood. And rhodiola improves mental performance under stress. Studies have shown it increases the number of neurons in the hippocampus to normal levels, the same neurons lost as a result of PTSD. One study published in Phytomedicine evaluated the efficacy of using Rhodiola Rosea compared to the antidepressant Zoloft. The research team concluded that even though rhodiola offered slightly less antidepressant benefits, it possessed a more favorable risk-benefit ratio for those with mild to moderate depression. SAMe is a naturally occurring amino acid methionine bound to an ATP molecule and is found in nearly every cell in your body. It helps produce and break down the neurotransmitters acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and melatonin in your brain. Studies show that SAMe is very effective in treating depression without the side effects of prescription antidepressants. And while pharmaceutical antidepressants take for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to begin working, SAMe can work much faster. Scientists at the Department of Health and Human Services conducted an analysis of 102 individual studies in 25 databases on SAMe and depression in 2002. In their report, the researchers concluded treatment with SAMe was equivalent to standard therapy for depression. For optimal effects with SAMe, stable enteric-coated tablets are recommended and taken on an empty stomach, either 1 hour before or 2 hours after meals. Now, one big word of caution on SAMe needs vitamin B6 and B12 and folate to work, or SAMe will elevate your homocysteine levels. High homocysteine can cause heart attacks. St. John's wort is a potent antidepressant. It has been used to treat a variety of internal and external illnesses dating back to the ancient Greeks. St. John's wort inhibits the uptake of serotonin, dopamine, GABA, glutamate, and norepinephrine. Inhibiting the neuronal uptake of these neurotransmitters can have a profound effect on depression and mood. St. John's wort extract decreases oxidative stress and prevents neurotoxicity and brain inflammation. It helps maintain mitochondria electric potential in brain cells, and St. John's wort moderates the genes controlling the function of your HPA axis, which is directly related to symptoms of anxiety and stress. In 1977, the British Medical Journal published a meta-analysis of 23 previously published studies on St. John's wort, drawn from foreign medical journals. The analysis showed that overall, St. John's wort was significantly superior to placebo and was as effective as pharmaceutical antidepressants. The same journal published another study in 2005 showing that St. John's wort was equally effective in treating depression and better tolerated than widely prescribed antidepressant Paxil. St. John's wort has been extensively studied for treating a wide range of health disorders, including PTSD. Now, to see more of these studies, go to the original transcripts for this video and click on the live link for St. John's wort so you can see the review of this amazing nootropic supplement. But dosage of St. John's wort and choice of supplement can be complicated, so please refer to the original review on Nootropics Expert. And you should not use St. John's wort if you are taking any kind of antidepressant medication. Please see the full list of precautions on the full review on Nootropics Expert. You took refuge in the shower as the roof was peeled off from over your head, and now you feel homeless in 90-degree heat with no AC, no water or food for days, and you can't call any place because the cell towers are down. Months after the trauma, and when things have finally settled down, the symptoms of rage and feeling of hopelessness set in. You can't talk to family and friends, and your nights are filled with nightmares and no sleep. It doesn't have to be this way. PTSD is not a tough nut to crack, no matter what the mental health professionals say. Instead of reliving the horror of the trauma you were dealt with using prolonged exposure therapy or dealing with the side effects or outright failure of antidepressants, try natural nootropic supplements instead and put your life back together. You can recover. The thing is, you're not going to get any help from your doctor. They haven't the knowledge or the experience in anything other than traditional treatment. You will likely have to do some experimenting on your own. You can start with this, try this nootropic stack for PTSD. Ashwagandha or Bacopa, Lithium Orotate, NADH, SAMe with a high-quality B-complex supplement, and Rhodiola Rosea. And learn to steep and drink 3 to 4 cups of green tea during your day and see how you feel in the next few days. If one nootropic doesn't seem to be providing any benefit, then try another from the list that we talked about in this video. Follow the dosage recommendations for each provided in the full review for each of these nootropics on Nootropics Expert. And keep at it until you feel relief from PTSD symptoms that you've been dealing with, and get your life back with these safe, natural treatments for PTSD. So that's my report on nootropics for PTSD. If you want to see links to the studies I talked about, go to nootropicsexpert.com and search for PTSD, or click on the link below this video. There you'll find a full transcript of this video, and you'll find dozens of articles on all the well-known nootropics on Nootropics Expert. If you have any questions, or you want to share your experience with PTSD and nootropics, please use the comment section at the bottom of the post on Nootropics Expert. I respond to comments and questions at Nootropics Expert usually the same day. And if you want to see more videos on all the best nootropics used today, subscribe to this channel before you leave. I'll be putting up new videos on nootropics and optimizing your brain every week. I'm David Toman, author of Nootropics Expert.